My husband got my best friend pregnant and now is forcing me to raise the child. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. About a year ago, I started getting suspicious that my husband was having an affair. So naturally, I started investigating. I went through his phone when he was asleep, but I didn't find anything. That's when I realized that I needed to start following him. And when I did is when I found out who he was cheating on me with. Turns out, it was my best friend. My best friend had just gotten a divorce with her husband at the time. And she told me that she was trying to have fun with as many men as she possibly could. I just never thought it would occur to her to sleep with my husband. For a full week, I followed my husband and he would see my best friend every single day. Sometimes they would meet up at her house since her husband left her the house. Sometimes they would end up at cheap motels. Of course, I started taking pictures on my iPhone to keep track of everything in case I needed to get a divorce. Come to find out, she was pregnant with twins. Part 2 is My husband got my best friend pregnant and is now forcing me to raise the kids. Disclaimer, is not my story time. After realizing that my husband was cheating on me with my best friend, I confronted him and her together. I pretended I was having a little dinner party and I invited her over. Really did make a nice dinner though. They did not suspect a thing. Comes into the house and gives me a big hug. Right then and there, I hand her my phone so that she could see all of the pictures I took of her and my husband making out outside of motels. Then she looks at my husband and says, "What did you say?" What did you say? He didn't even bother to look me in the face. Handed me back my phone and simply left the house. Then I'm left alone with my husband. Start confronting him and then he tells me that he made a mistake and that he was just bored with our relationship and that he loved me. He manipulated me so much that night that I ended up forgiving him. He promised he would never see my best friend again. And guess what? My bestie kept looking for my husband. One night she came over and told me that she needed to see him. I did not let her into the house and she started yelling. That's when she finally says I'm pregnant with twins. Apparently she had been pregnant for 3 months and didn't tell anybody. And my husband was happy about it. That's when he asked me if I would be willing to raise the kids. Part 3 is up. My husband got my best friend pregnant and is now forcing me to raise the kids. Disclaimer, is not my story time. After she told us that she was 3 months pregnant, my husband was so happy. He told her that he would take care of everything and not to worry about the medical bills. As soon as my best friend left our house, my husband turns to me and says, "You and I are gonna raise those kids without her." That's when I said he was crazy. I was not about to raise the kid that he had with my best friend. That's when he said that if I didn't, he would divorce me and marry my best friend. But I do have to say, I am still madly in love with my husband. We've only been together for 3 years. He was my dream man when we got married and he still kind of is my dream man even though he did cheat on me with my best friend. When he threatened me with that, I said okay. The next 6 months, my best friend moved into our house while she was pregnant. My husband and I served her hand and foot. And in some weird way, my best friend and I became best friends again, even though she was having my husband's babies. Also turns out that she was having twins. During the pregnancy, my husband told her that she could stay to live with us and we could all raise the kids together. To be honest, I didn't mind the idea. My husband's real plan was to try to get rid of her, so that we could move away and she wouldn't be able to find us. But my best friend was looking forward to having her babies. Once she gave birth, my husband decided to bring her back to our house with the babies. Exactly a week later, he kicked her out of our house. And he offered her $50,000 to give the babies to us. And she agreed. So now I'm stuck raising the twins by myself. My husband is always away for work. My best friend never even comes around to look at her kids. My husband told me that he doesn't think we should have our own kids. He also promised he wouldn't cheat again, but I don't know what to believe. What should I do? Story time about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. Growing up, I was really awkward. My parents always used to call me the ugly duckling, but my dad told me not to worry that when I would grow up, I would become beautiful. Honestly, this really stuck to my head and I am very beautiful now. I used to have braces, acne. My hair has always been curly, but I didn't know how to treat it back then. My mom had really straight hair, so she had no idea how to do my hair either. And this was the toughest thing for me. I would show up to school with knots in my hair because I didn't even know how to brush it. Eventually, my mom did start taking better care of my hair, which really helped. I also didn't know how to dress for my body. I wore big hoodies, big t-shirts, while the other girls in my high school dressed for their body type. I honestly just had no clue. I did get bullied, but mostly by boys. I think the girls probably just felt bad for me, so I never really had problems with other girls. A group of boys would always bother me. One of them even asked me out pretending that he wanted to go out with me. Of course I said yes because I actually believed him. He asked me to go to the movies, and when I showed up, he wasn't there. I decided to go watch the movie anyway, but the next day in school, I couldn't hear the end of it. To my face, this guy called me stupid. A few days later, they made a list of the ugliest girls. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimer, is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. That's when the boys came out with the list of the ugliest girls in high school. What they did was pass around some flyers with all the names on it, and then they had people write the #1 ugliest girl on the list. As soon as I saw my name on the list, I wanted to die. I pretended I was sick and went home. There was this one girl who actually stood up for me and the rest of the girls, and she was actually one of the prettiest girls in the entire school. She told everyone to knock it off, but nobody listened to her. Instead, the boys added her to the list as well, but there was no way that she was going to get voted #1. I would show up every day to school that week wishing that I was dead. Finally, on Friday, they came out with the winner. And of course, everyone picked me. I was completely mortified, but I actually started laughing when I saw the list. It was like the stress from the entire week had finally accumulated, and my reaction was to just laugh. While they were all hoping that I was just gonna break down and cry, I started to laugh in their faces. The teacher asked me what was wrong and I showed her the list. She ran over to the principal's office and everything became way too dramatic for me. So I literally decided to run away from school. When I got home, I told my parents everything. Part 3 is up. Time about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimers now my story time instead of me on Instagram. When I got home and told my parents what happened, my dad actually started to cry. He actually did feel really bad for me. They sat me down and told me that looks weren't everything. That's when my dad told me again that I would grow out of this awkward phase. Then they decided to take me shopping to the mall. I went into this really cute clothing store that I had always wanted to go to but never had the courage to, and they actually bought me a full wardrobe. After that, that's when my mom took me to a salon and they actually did my hair. They gave me a whole hair care routine, which I had never even heard of before. And I even went and got some Noxzema, which actually the Noxzema really worked for my acne. So when I got back to school, I felt like a different person. But not really because I was still me. The principal had gone out of her way to make all the boys pay. But really, they only got suspension and didn't go to school for a week. The rest of high school was actually not that bad. I did look a lot better. 5 years later, I'm absolutely gorgeous. And guess what? One of the boys who bullied me actually slipped into my DMs last week. What should I say? Storytime about how I stole my sister's boyfriend and don't regret it. Disclaimers in my storytime instead of me on Instagram. When I walked in on my boyfriend and my sister hugging, I knew I had to do something. I went straight to my parents and told them what she was doing. My dad pulled her into her room and talked to her, but she totally denied everything. She said that she was not flirting with my boyfriend, but we all knew that was a lie. Even my boyfriend was honest with me and told me that she had been flirting with him openly. That's when my boyfriend told me he didn't even want to come over to our house because my sister made him that uncomfortable. And when I told my parents this, they felt so embarrassed. They called my boyfriend and personally apologized to him. He was actually so sweet though. He would come visit me to my house and we would just chill out in his car while my sister was inside watching us through the window. Yeah, she was crazy. He and I eventually broke up because he went off to live in another country. And guess what? My sister said that she knew he never loved me and that's why he left me. She was being so mean at the time. A few years later, she started dating someone. Of course, at the time, it never occurred to me to even flirt with him or act the way that she did with my boyfriend. You see, I'm above all that. But as soon as I got a new boyfriend, she would start flirting with him. And she had no shame about it. This became a running problem in my family. My parents would ask her to leave me alone and my boyfriends, and she would say that she did. But no, she didn't. Oh yeah, and her boyfriend broke up with her because he noticed that she would flirt with a lot of guys. Apparently, she did it even in front of him. So when she finally got a new boyfriend, I decided that I was gonna do the same thing to her. I started flirting with her boyfriend a little. Not a lot, but I definitely made sure to tell him I thought he was attractive. After a few weeks, he started saying things back to me, and I knew that it was working. I never did it in front of my sisters and my parents because I didn't want them to get mad at me. So instead, I got her boyfriend to basically fall in love with me. I already knew everything about him because my sister would tell me, so I just started telling him I liked the same things he did. It got to the point where one day he kissed me and I didn't tell my parents. I made sure to get his hopes up. Part 3 is up. I got my sister's boyfriend to fall in love with me, her life turned to misery. No, I didn't regret it. Disclaimers is not my story time instead of me on Instagram. One day I went up to my sister and told her that her boyfriend had kissed me. First she thought I was making it up to make her jealous. Told me I could never compete with her and that she was the more beautiful sister out of the two of us. Which is wrong. So I handed her my phone so that she could see all the messages that her boyfriend and I had been sending each other. And that's when she lost it. She started wailing on me. She started slapping and kicking me. My parents ran into her room and asked her what was wrong. I told my parents that I treated my sister the way she treated me. She would always go after my boyfriends, flirt with them, and try to get them to break up with me. Of course my parents didn't agree with me, so they were really angry. They separated us, but my sister went crazy. She called her boyfriend and told him to come over. Obviously, he didn't know that she already knew at the time. And when he came over, she started beating him up. She grabbed a pan from the kitchen and started swinging at him. She actually ended up giving him a concussion. After that, she begged for his forgiveness, but he still broke up with her. At the end of the day, he ended up leaving her. She was so stupid for begging him to stay with her. Her boyfriend even asked me if we could be together, and I told him no. I told him that the whole time I had just been playing him just to get back at my sister. Which I know is so cruel, but he deserved it. After that, my sister and I decided to make peace. She told me that she wouldn't mess with my boyfriends anymore and that she would stop being evil. But after a month of having my new boyfriend, I found her flirting with him too. I told her if she didn't stop that I would make her life miserable once again. I'm pretty sure she has a boyfriend, but she doesn't want to tell my family. Cause she knows that I'll go after him and I would probably end up making him fall in love with me too. But at this point, I just don't know what to do. What should I do? She's so evil and I want to make her life miserable. Bye. Story time about how I kissed every teacher I ever had a crush on and never got caught. Disclaimers is not my story time instead of me on Instagram. Growing up, I was a spoiled brat. My parents gave me literally everything I ever wanted. For my 15th birthday, I told my dad that if he didn't get me a BMW, I would run away. So on my 15th birthday, I got the BMW. My parents never said no to anything. One time I told my parents I wanted to have a party at my house and they said no. I threw a tantrum and started to cry. My dad pulled out his credit card and told me to stop crying and I could go buy whatever I wanted. And I pretty much maxed out his card. He did punish me for a month, but all he really took away was the TV. As you can see, I was completely entitled. And yes, looking back, I would love to punch myself. I was a complete brat. When I got into high school, I went boy crazy. My parents told me they did not want me having boyfriends, but of course, I put up a fight. They had no choice but to let me have boyfriends. I would bring them over to my house all the time, and I would always take them up to my room and lock our door. My dad told me one time to open the door, and I wouldn't, so he just left me. Eventually, I got bored with all my boyfriends, so I would just break up with them. But one day, this new high school teacher comes in. We made eye contact for about 5 seconds. I was obsessed. Follow for part 2. Storytime about how I kissed every high school teacher I had a crush on and never got caught. Disclaimer, is not my storytime, it's on Instagram. After we locked eyes for about 5 seconds, he looked away. But I was totally obsessed. He was like the most perfect guy I'd ever seen. And the first thing I did was go to his classroom. I knocked on the door, and as soon as he saw me, he smiled and said, "Come in." We talked for about 2 minutes, and he told me that he was only substituting. So I knew I needed to make my move really quick. Fortunately, I was not taking the classes that he was substituting, but I had to find a way to get close to him. So I started watching everything that he did. My school had a big outdoors area, and there were lots of tables around. And I noticed that he would go behind the library to eat his lunch. So I started going behind the library to eat my lunch. I decided to get there before he did so that it would be a coincidence. As soon as he saw me, he waved, but he sat at another table. So I grabbed my food and went over to sit with him. That's when I started asking him if he had a girlfriend. He got super red. This guy was blushing. And I knew right away that he probably had a crush on me. He basically didn't give me a yes or a no about the girlfriend, but I didn't care. But I didn't want to make my move right away. He said for the next 3 days I sat with him at lunch. Finally, he asked me, "Don't you have friends?" And I said yes, but they're all annoying. That's when I leaned in for the kiss. And no, he did not pull away. The kiss lasted for about 10 seconds. As soon as we pull away, he starts looking around to see if anybody saw. And he told me that I need to find someone my own age. By the way, he was 24, I was 17. Next day at lunch, I asked him if he wanted to go to my car. And we ended up kissing 3 more times that day. That's when he asked me for my phone number. Follow for part 3. Storytime about how I kissed every teacher I had a crush on and never got caught. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. As we were sitting in my car kissing, he asked me for my number. Gave him my number, and that's when he said that because he's only a substitute teacher, we could still hang out outside of school. And I said, of course. The following week, he was gone because the teacher he was substituting for was back. And no, he never called me. A few months later, we had another substitute teacher. And this guy was also really good looking. He wasn't as good looking as the first one, but good enough to distract me. This time I got lucky. He was substituting for drama. And I took drama twice a week. So I knew that I was going to be seeing him often. First thing I needed to do was get him to notice me. But this took a lot longer than the other guy. For the first week, I would just try to talk to him, but he was not having it. He would literally tell me to just go sit down. But I couldn't give up. One day after class, I decided to stay late. I knew that he would be staying late as well, so I knew that was my in. I went up to him and asked him if I could help him out. He said yes, and he basically told me to put away some of the costuming. As we were doing that, I just started talking to him. And I swear to God, for a minute, this guy forgot that I was a student. We started talking about everything. By the end of the conversation, he told me that I was really mature and that I made him laugh. So the next day, I stayed after school with him again. This time we were backstage organizing props, and we were completely isolated. That's when I told him that I thought he was really cute and that he was probably a good kisser. Then he walks up to me and kisses me. Oh my God, the butterflies in my stomach. When he stopped kissing me, I pulled him in and kissed him again. That's when he came to his senses and told me that I needed to go home. So I did, and the following week, he was not there. Apparently, he had a family emergency, but we know it's a lie. Looking back on my behavior, I'm totally horrified. Where did I get the courage to do all the things I did? I never spoke to any of them again, but I did see one of them on Instagram. I did not follow him. He's now got a big beer belly. Ew. Definitely don't do what I did. If I could go back, I would not have done it. Bye.